The year was 2087, and Earth had never seen anything like this before. A massive ship appeared in the sky one morning, so beautiful it looked like someone had built a palace out of starlight. The news called it the Celestial Harmony, and everyone on the planet held their breath as they watched it orbit peacefully above them. Inside that magnificent ship, Queen Zarathia stood at a window looking down at the blue planet below. She was breathtaking in the way that made people stop talking when she entered a room. Her skin had a soft glow that changed color with her moods, shifting from pearl white to gentle gold. Her eyes were like deep purple jewels, and she moved with the grace of someone born to rule. But right now, even the most powerful woman in the galaxy felt nervous. This was the biggest day of her life. She was here to make peace between her people, the Luminari, and the humans of Earth. If she succeeded, it would mean trade, friendship, and a brighter future for both worlds. If she failed, well, she didn't want to think about that. The Luminari were special in many ways. They could smell emotions, read feelings through scent, and communicate without words just by releasing different chemical signals. It was perfectly normal for them, like how humans might read facial expressions or body language. But they had never met humans before, so they had no idea how different Earth people really were. Zarathia had spent months preparing for this moment. She had studied human culture, learned their languages, and practiced their customs. She knew exactly what to say, how to stand, and when to smile. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail. Nothing could go wrong. Down in the lower levels of the ship, Jake Chen was having the worst day of his career. He was the head maintenance engineer, which meant when something broke, everyone looked at him to fix it. And today, of all days, the air recycling system had decided to have a complete breakdown. Jake was not the kind of person who usually got invited to fancy diplomatic meetings. He was more comfortable with tools than with people, more at home in the engine room than in the elegant conference halls upstairs. He wore simple work clothes, kept his hair short and practical, and had hands that showed he wasn't afraid of hard work. But he was good at his job, really good. When machines broke, Jake could feel what was wrong with them, almost like they were telling him their problems. He had been working for 6 straight hours, crawling through tight spaces and wrestling with stubborn mechanical parts. His shirt was soaked with sweat, and he was tired, but he was determined to get the air system working before the big ceremony started. The welcoming ceremony was supposed to be perfect. Earth's best diplomats were there, wearing their finest clothes and biggest smiles. The ship's main hall had been decorated with flowers from both worlds, and cameras were recording everything to broadcast across the galaxy. Queen Zarathia entered the hall like she was floating. Everyone stopped talking and stared. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid silver, and a crown that caught the light like captured stars. She smiled graciously and began to speak about friendship between worlds, about building bridges across the vastness of space. Everything was going exactly according to plan. That's when Jake's communicator buzzed with an emergency alert. The backup air system had just failed too. If he didn't fix it in the next 10 minutes, the entire diplomatic section would start getting stuffy and uncomfortable. He couldn't let that happen, not today. He grabbed his toolkit and ran through the corridors, taking shortcuts he had memorized during his years on the ship. He knew exactly where to go, exactly what needed to be done. He just had to get there fast. Jake burst through the maintenance entrance just as Queen Zarathia was walking past with her elegant procession. He was focused completely on the broken machine ahead of him, mentally running through the repair steps. When it happened, he bumped right into her. It wasn't a hard collision, just a brief moment where his shoulder touched hers as they both tried to avoid each other. He immediately started apologizing, his face turning red with embarrassment. Here he was, sweaty and dirty from work, and he had just crashed into the most important person in the galaxy. But Queen Zarathia wasn't listening to his apologies. The moment they made contact, something extraordinary happened. His scent, the natural smell of honest human work and effort, reached her sensitive luminary nose. The effect was immediate and completely overwhelming. Her skin, which had been a dignified pearl color, suddenly flushed deep rose. Her carefully controlled expression wavered as her eyes went wide with surprise. She felt a warm tingling sensation spreading through her entire body, starting from where they had touched, and radiating outward like gentle electricity. Her heart started beating faster. Her thoughts, which were usually crystal clear and perfectly organized, became scattered and confused. She tried to continue her graceful walk, but her legs felt unsteady, like she was trying to move through warm honey. The strangers around her were still smiling and talking, waiting for her to continue the ceremony. But Zorathia couldn't focus on their words. All she could think about was that brief moment of contact, that completely unexpected scent that seemed to have awakened something in her that she didn't even know existed. Jake, meanwhile, was mortified. He mumbled more apologies and hurried past her toward the broken machinery, completely unaware that he had just turned the most composed person in the galaxy into a confused, blushing mess. Queen Zorathia somehow managed to finish the ceremony. She smiled. She spoke the right words. She shook hands with the Earth diplomats, but inside, she was in complete chaos. Her advisors noticed that her skin kept changing colors inappropriately, that she seemed distracted, that she kept glancing toward the maintenance areas where that human had disappeared. The moment the formal events were over, she retreated to her private chambers, leaving behind a room full of confused diplomats and worried advisors. She locked her door, leaned against it, and tried to understand what had just happened to her. She was Queen Zorathia, ruler of 1,000 worlds, negotiator of impossible treaties, someone who had never lost her composure in decades of leadership. She had met alien species that would terrify most people, had faced down warriors and politicians, and never once felt anything like this overwhelming, wonderful, terrifying sensation. And it had all started with one ordinary human who smelled like honest work and determination. As she sat in her elegant quarters, surrounded by luxury and power, Queen Zorathia realized that her carefully planned diplomatic mission had just become far more complicated than she had ever imagined. Queen Zorathia paced back and forth in her private quarters like a caged animal. Her elegant rooms, decorated with treasures from across the galaxy, felt smaller than a prison cell. Every few minutes, her skin would shift colors without warning. First pale blue, then soft pink, then back to her normal pearl shade, then golden yellow. She had no control over it anymore. She pressed her hands against her face and tried to think clearly. This was impossible. She was the queen of the Luminari Empire. She had negotiated peace treaties with the most stubborn alien races in the galaxy. She had stared down space pirates and charmed ruthless politicians. But one brief encounter with a sweaty human engineer had turned her into this confused, blushing mess. The door chimed softly. "Your Majesty," came a familiar voice. "May I enter?" Dr. Velter stepped inside, carrying his medical scanner and wearing the concerned expression he usually saved for serious emergencies. He was an old friend, someone who had known Zorathia since she was a young princess learning to rule. If anyone could help her understand what was happening, it would be him, Velter. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Something's wrong with me. I can't control my skin color. My thoughts keep wandering, and I feel strange." The doctor raised an eyebrow. In all his years serving the royal family, he had never seen the composed queen look so flustered. "When did this begin, Your Majesty?" Zorathia as cheeks flushed pink again. "It started during the welcoming ceremony. I made brief contact with one of the human engineers, and ever since then, I've been..." She gestured helplessly at her changing skin. "Like this?" Dr. Velter nodded thoughtfully and began running his scanner over her. The device beeped and hummed as it analyzed her biology. "Interesting," he murmured. "Your hormone levels are completely irregular. Your neural activity is spiking in areas associated with bonding and attraction, and your scent receptors are hypersensitive." "What does that mean?" Zorathia asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. The doctor studied his readings for a long moment before speaking. "Your Majesty, I believe you've experienced what we might call a biological compatibility reaction. Human chemistry, it seems, interacts with our luminary biology in ways we never anticipated. Meanwhile, 3 decks below, Jake was trying to focus on his work and failing miserably. He kept thinking about that strange encounter with the alien queen. The way she had looked at him afterward, with those incredible purple eyes wide with surprise, kept replaying in his mind. He told himself he was being ridiculous. Queens didn't think about maintenance workers, especially alien queens with more important things to worry about. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened in that brief moment when they touched his supervisor, Chief Rodriguez, came by to check on the repairs. "How's it going, Jake?" "The diplomatic folks upstairs are asking if we can finish the air system work today. Almost done." Jake replied, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Just need to replace this filter assembly and run some tests." "Good. Try to stay out of the way of the VIPs if you can." I heard the queen seemed a bit distracted after the ceremony. Jake felt his face get warm. "Yeah, about that. I might have accidentally bumped into her earlier." Rodriguez laughed. "Don't worry about it. These royal types probably have people bump into them all the time. I'm sure she's already forgotten about it. If only he knew how wrong he was." Back in the royal quarters, Dr. Velter was explaining his findings to an increasingly mortified queen. "The human scent triggered a cascade reaction in your system," he said gently. "It's activated bonding pathways that have been dormant your entire life. Essentially, Your Majesty, your biology has decided this human is your ideal mate." Zoralia sat down heavily in her favorite chair. "That's impossible. We've never even had a conversation. I don't know anything about him except that he fixes machines and works hard. Biology doesn't care about logic," the doctor replied. "Our ancestors evolved this bonding mechanism to help them find compatible partners across different luminary subspecies. But we've never encountered human pheromones before. The reaction appears to be stronger than anything we've seen in our own species." The queen buried her face in her hands. "This is a disaster, Velter. I'm supposed to be negotiating the most important treaty in our history, and instead I'm, what, pining after a human engineer like some lovesick teenager. There may be a way to manage the symptoms," the doctor said carefully. "If we could study the human's biochemistry, understand exactly what compounds are causing this reaction, we might be able to develop a treatment." Zoralia looked up hopefully. "Really? But," he continued, "it would require prolonged exposure to the source. You would need to spend time near this human to allow me to monitor your reactions and test different approaches." The queen's skin shifted to deep rose again at the thought. That would be very difficult. Double quotes. Dr. Velter noticed her reaction and made some notes on his scanner. "I see the symptoms persist even when merely discussing the subject." Over the next few hours, Zoralia tried everything she could think of to regain control. She meditated, practiced her breathing exercises, and reviewed diplomatic protocols. Nothing worked. Every time she heard footsteps in the corridor, her heart would race, hoping it might be him. When she caught unfamiliar scents in the air circulation system, she found herself analyzing them, searching for that one particular smell that had started all this chaos. The worst part was the dreams. During her afternoon rest period, she found herself imagining conversations with the human engineer. In her mind, they talked about his work, about the stars, about the simple things that seemed to matter more than all the politics and ceremony that usually filled her days. She woke up, feeling more confused than ever. That evening, there was supposed to be a formal dinner with the Earth diplomats. Zoralia dressed carefully in her most regal robes and practiced her composure in the mirror. She could do this. She was a queen. She had responsibilities that were bigger than her personal feelings. But as she walked toward the dining hall, she caught a familiar scent in the corridor. Her steps slowed, and her skin began shifting colors again. Somewhere nearby, Jake was working on another repair. Without even realizing what she was doing, she found herself taking a detour, following the scent like it was calling to her. She told herself she was just being curious, just wanting to see if her reaction would be the same a second time. She found him in a maintenance alcove, carefully adjusting some kind of environmental control panel. He was focused completely on his work, using tools with the precise movements of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. There was something peaceful about watching him work, something that made all the stress and responsibility she carried feel lighter. Then he looked up and saw her standing there. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Jake's eyes went wide with surprise, and he nearly dropped his wrench. Zorathia felt that same warm, electric sensation spreading through her body again, even stronger than before. "Your Majesty," Jake stammered, scrambling to his feet. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were. I was just finishing this repair." But Zorathia wasn't listening to his words. She was lost in the sound of his voice. The way he moved, the incredible complexity of emotions his scent was triggering. In her enhanced senses, her carefully practiced composure crumbled completely. She turned and fled back to her quarters, leaving behind a very confused human engineer and the growing certainty that her problem was much bigger than she had ever imagined. The morning of the crucial peace negotiations arrived with all the weight of history behind it. Representatives from both Earth and the Luminary Empire gathered in the grand conference room, their faces serious as they prepared to discuss trade, agreements, territorial boundaries, and the future of interstellar relations. Queen Zorathia sat at the head of the massive table, looking every inch the powerful ruler she was supposed to be. Her advisors flanked her on both sides, their expressions confident and ready. The Earth diplomats across from them wore their best suits and carried thick folders of documents. But inside, Zorathia was falling apart. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of that strange human engineer. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the way he had looked so surprised to see her, the gentle concern in his voice when he apologized for the accident. Her skin had been shifting colors randomly all morning, and she had to concentrate just to keep it at a normal pearl shade. "Your Majesty," whispered her chief advisor, "the Earth delegation is ready to begin discussing the mining rights agreement." Zorathia nodded and tried to focus. This was important. The agreement they reached today would affect billions of lives across both civilizations. She could not let her personal problems interfere with something this significant. "We appreciate Earth's willingness to share resources," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "The Luminary Empire believes that cooperation benefits everyone involved." The negotiations proceeded smoothly for the first hour. Both sides made reasonable proposals, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in finding solutions that worked for everyone. Zorathia began to feel more confident. Maybe she could get through this day without any problems. That's when Jake walked in. He carried a small toolkit and moved quietly along the wall, trying not to disturb the important meeting. One of the translation devices had been acting up, and the diplomats needed it working perfectly to avoid any misunderstandings. Jake knew exactly how to fix it. He just needed a few minutes to adjust some settings. The moment his scent reached Zoralia's sensitive nose, everything went wrong. Her skin flushed bright crimson, a color so intense it was impossible to ignore. Her carefully prepared speech about trade routes died in her throat, as her brain suddenly filled with nothing but awareness of his presence. She found herself turning to look at him, completely forgetting that she was supposed to be leading one of the most important diplomatic meetings in galactic history. Jake, focused entirely on the malfunctioning translator, had no idea that the most powerful woman in the known universe was staring at him with obvious fascination. He knelt beside the device and began making careful adjustments, occasionally frowning in concentration as he tested different settings. The silence in the room grew awkward. Both delegations were staring at their queen, who had stopped talking mid-sentence and was now watching the maintenance worker with an expression that looked suspiciously like longing. "Your Majesty," prompted the Earth ambassador gently, "you were saying something about trade routes?" Zorathia blinked and tried to remember what she had been talking about. Trade routes, right? Important stuff. But Jake was right there, close enough that she could see the careful way he handled the delicate equipment. and all she could think about was how those same gentle hands had briefly touched her shoulder. 2 days ago, the trade routes, she repeated, her voice slightly breathless. Yes, they're very important for trading. En route, her advisors exchanged worried glances. Queen Zarathia never repeated herself. She certainly never used circular logic, and she definitely never lost track of her thoughts during crucial negotiations. Jake finished his work and stood up, testing the translator to make sure it was working properly. Satisfied with the repair, he packed up his tools and headed for the door. But as he passed behind Zarathia's chair, she caught his full scent again. This time, her reaction was even stronger. Her skin shifted through several colors in rapid succession: rose, gold, deep purple, then a shimmering silver that indicated extreme emotional distress among her people. She made a small sound, somewhere between a sigh and a gasp, and gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. Everyone in the room saw it happen. The Earth diplomats looked confused and concerned. They had studied Luminari culture extensively, but they had never seen anything like this reaction from their queen. Some of them wondered if she was having some kind of medical emergency. Zarathia's own advisors, however, were beginning to understand that something much more serious was happening. They knew their queen better than anyone, and they recognized the signs of biological bonding that their species experienced. But the idea that their composed, controlled ruler could be affected this way by a random human was almost too shocking to believe. The meeting continued, but it was a disaster. Zarathia kept losing her train of thought, agreeing to things without really listening, and asking questions that didn't make sense. Her advisors had to step in several times to clarify her statements or ask for breaks so they could consult with her privately. During one of these breaks, her chief advisor pulled her aside. "Your Majesty, what is happening to you? You're not yourself today." Zarathia knew she couldn't explain the truth. How could she tell them that a human engineer's natural scent had somehow triggered a biological reaction that made it impossible for her to think straight? They would think she had lost her mind, or worse, they might decide she was unfit to rule. "I'm fine," she lied, trying to control her shifting skin color. Just tired from all the preparation. But she wasn't fine, and everyone could see it. By the end of the day, rumors were flying through both delegations. Some of the Earth diplomats whispered that the Luminari Queen might be ill. Others wondered if this was some kind of negotiation tactic, though they couldn't figure out what she hoped to gain by acting confused and distracted. The Luminari advisors were even more concerned. They had begun to suspect that their queen had been somehow compromised. A few of them quietly wondered if the humans had used some kind of biological weapon or mind control device on her. The idea that this could be a natural reaction seemed impossible. That evening, after the failed negotiations, Zarathia sat alone in her quarters feeling more lost than she had ever felt in her life. She was supposed to be strong, decisive, in control. She was supposed to be leading her people toward a brighter future. Instead, she was acting like a confused teenager with her first crush. The worst part was that she couldn't stop thinking about Jake. Every time she remembered the way he had carefully fixed that translator, the focused expression on his face, the natural grace of his movements, her heart started racing all over again. She knew she had to do something. The peace treaty was too important to fail because of her personal problems. But she also knew that avoiding Jake wasn't working. Every time he came near her, her reaction got stronger, not weaker. Maybe Dr. Velter was right. Maybe the only way to deal with this was to confront it directly. Taking a deep breath and trying to gather what remained of her royal courage, Queen Zarathia made a decision that would change everything. She was going to find Jake and talk to him, even if it meant admitting that the most powerful woman in the galaxy had been completely undone by one ordinary human who smelled like honest work and kindness. She just hoped she could get through the conversation without completely embarrassing herself again. Queen Zarathia stood outside Jake's quarters for 10 full minutes before she found the courage to press the door chime. Her heart was beating so fast she wondered if he would be able to hear it through the metal walls. She had ruled an empire for 15 years, faced down space pirates, and negotiated with the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. But somehow this felt like the scariest thing she had ever done. The door opened, and Jake's surprised face appeared. He was wearing casual clothes now, just a simple shirt and comfortable pants, but somehow that made everything worse. Without his work uniform, he looked more human, more real. And her skin immediately started shifting toward that telltale rose color again. "Your Majesty," Jake said, his eyes going wide. What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" She had practiced this conversation a dozen times in her mind. But now that she was actually standing in front of him, all her carefully planned words disappeared. How could she possibly explain that his natural scent had triggered some kind of biological bonding reaction in her alien body? How could she tell him that she, the most powerful woman in the known universe, had been reduced to a blushing, distracted mess because of one accidental bump in a quarter? "I need to talk to you," she managed to say, "about what happened during the negotiations today." Jake stepped back to let her into his modest quarters. The space was small and simple, nothing like the luxury she was used to, but it was clean and organized. She could see technical manuals on his desk, tools arranged neatly on a workbench, and a few personal photos showing him with people who must be his family back on Earth. But what hit her most strongly was the scent his quarters were filled with. His presence, concentrated and unmistakable, and she felt that same warm, overwhelming sensation wash over her again. She gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "Are you sick?" Jake asked, genuine concern in his voice. "You look like you're having trouble breathing." His kindness only made it worse. Here she was, probably about to ruin his life with her confession, and he was worried about her well-being. She forced herself to look at him directly. "Jake," she began, then stopped. She had never used his first name before. "I need to explain something to you, and it's going to sound completely crazy." He sat down across from her, giving her his full attention. "Okay, I'm listening." So she told him everything about luminary biology and their enhanced sense of smell, about how their species use scent to communicate emotions and form bonds, about how human chemistry had never been tested with her people before, and how his particular combination of natural pheromones had triggered something in her system that she couldn't control. Jake listened without interrupting, his expression growing more thoughtful as she spoke. When she finished, she expected him to laugh or tell her she was imagining things. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and nodded slowly. "That actually makes a lot of sense," he said. Zoralia blinked in surprise. "It does. Well, think about it from an engineering perspective," Jake explained. "You've got two different biological systems that evolve completely separately. When they interact for the first time, you're bound to get some unexpected reactions. It's like connecting to pieces of equipment that were never designed to work together. Sometimes you get interference, sometimes you get amplification." She stared at him, in all her worry and embarrassment. She had never thought of it in such practical terms. "You're not disturbed by this?" Jake shrugged. "Why would I be? It's not like you chose to have this reaction. And honestly, it explains a lot about what happened during that meeting today. You noticed?" "Kind of hard not to," he said with a gentle smile. "You turned about 5 different colors and looked like you were having some kind of internal struggle. I figured I had done something wrong by being in there while you were trying to work." Zoralia felt a wave of relief wash over her. He wasn't running away or treating her like she was crazy. He was just accepting it as a problem that needed to be solved. "Dr. Velter thinks that controlled exposure might help," she said carefully. "If I spend small amounts of time around you, my system might build up some tolerance to the reaction, like allergy treatment." Jake nodded. "That makes sense to want to try it," and so began the strangest friendship in galactic history. Every evening after the failed diplomatic sessions, Zoralia would slip quietly down to Jake's quarters. At first, she could only stay for a few minutes, before the overwhelming sensations became too much, but gradually, she began to build up tolerance. More importantly, they began to talk. Jake told her about growing up on Earth, about his family's small engineering business, about how he had always been fascinated by the way machines worked. He spoke about his dreams of exploring space and his excitement at being chosen for this diplomatic mission. Zoralia found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, about the loneliness of being queen, about the weight of making decisions that affected billions of lives, about how she sometimes missed the simple pleasures that ordinary people took for granted. "I've never just sat and talked with someone like this," she admitted one evening. "Usually, people want something from me: trade agreements, political favors, marriage alliances. They see the crown, not the person wearing it. I don't know much about crowns," Jake said, "but I can see the person just fine." Their conversations ranged from serious to silly. Jake would explain how various machines worked, using simple analogies that made even complex engineering concepts easy to understand. Zoralia would tell him about different planets she had visited, about alien cultures and their strange customs. They discovered they both loved puzzles and problem solving. They both felt the weight of responsibility in their work, though on vastly different scales. They both had trouble sleeping when they were worried about something important. "You know what's funny?" Jake said one evening as they sat on his small couch, sharing a meal he had prepared from the ship's food synthesizer. "I always thought royalty would be completely different from regular people. More formal, more distant." "We are, usually," Zoralia replied. "I spent years learning how to be formal and distant. It's part of the job. But you're not like that with me." She looked at him, this kind, intelligent human who had somehow become the most important person in her world. "No," she said softly, "I'm not." It was during their second week of evening meetings that Jake made an observation that changed everything. "You know, I've been thinking about this whole bonding reaction thing," he said, organizing some tools on his workbench. "And I've been having some weird experiences too." Zoralia looked up from the technical manual she had been reading. "What kind of experiences?" "Well, I've been sleeping better since we started these talks, and I seem to be more aware of people's emotions lately. Like, I can almost sense when someone is upset or happy, even if they're trying to hide it." She set down the manual, her full attention on him now. "Jake, that's not normal for humans, is it?" "Not really, no. I mean, some people are naturally empathetic, but this is different. It's like I can almost smell feelings, if that makes sense." Dr. Vilter's words came flooding back to her, a bonding reaction that worked both ways. She had been so focused on her own symptoms that she hadn't considered Jake might be changing too. "I think," she said slowly, "that this connection between us might be stronger than we realized." Jake turned to look at her, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. The air between them seemed to shimmer with possibility, with the recognition that what was happening to them was rare and precious and completely terrifying. "So what do we do about it?" he asked quietly, before she could answer. Her communicator chimed with an urgent message. The peace negotiations were failing. Her advisors were demanding answers about her condition. And worst of all, some members of her council were beginning to question whether she was fit to rule. The real world was intruding on their secret friendship, and Zoralia realized that their time of hiding was about to come to an end. The emergency council meeting was called at dawn, and Queen Zoralia knew her secret was about to be exposed. She sat at the head of the conference table, trying to maintain her royal composure while her advisors filed in with grim expressions. The Earth diplomats were there too, looking confused and concerned about the sudden gathering. Her chief advisor, General Thane, stood up first. His withered face showed the worry of someone who had served the royal family for decades. "Your Majesty, we need to discuss your condition. The peace negotiations are falling apart, and frankly, we're concerned about your ability to lead." Zoralia felt her heart sink. She had known this moment would come, but she hadn't been prepared for how much it would hurt to hear those words from someone she trusted. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Dr. Velter stepped forward, carrying his medical scanner. "We believe you may have been compromised by some form of human biological weapon. Your behavior has been erratic. your decision-making impaired. We think the only solution is immediate medical intervention to reverse whatever has been done to you. And if I refuse? The silence in the room was heavy with unspoken implications. Finally, General Thane spoke again. Then we would have no choice but to remove you from these negotiations and appoint a new representative. Someone who hasn't been affected by whatever the humans have done. Zorathia looked around the table at the faces of people who had served her faithfully for years. They genuinely believed they were protecting her and their empire. They had no idea that what they wanted to cure was the first real happiness she had ever experienced. The Earth ambassador, Dr. Peterson, looked genuinely shocked. I can assure you that Earth has not used any biological weapons. We came here in good faith, seeking peace between our peoples. Then explain our queen's condition, General Thane demanded. She was perfectly normal until she arrived on this ship. That's when the conference room door opened and Jake walked in. He wasn't supposed to be there. The meeting was for diplomats and advisors only. But somehow he had heard about what was happening, and he couldn't stand by while Zorathia faced this alone. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but determined. "I think I can explain what's been happening to Queen Zorathia." Every eye in the room turned to him. The Luminari advisors looked suspicious and angry. The Earth diplomats seemed confused about why a maintenance engineer was interrupting such an important meeting. But Zorathia felt a surge of gratitude and something deeper. Here was this ordinary human, risking everything to stand beside her when she needed support most. Jake walked to the center of the room, his hand steady despite the pressure of so many important people staring at him. Queen Zorathia isn't sick, and she hasn't been attacked with any kind of weapon. What's happened to her is completely natural. Explain, General Thane commanded. Jake looked at Zorathia, and she gave him a small nod. They had talked about this possibility during their evening conversations. If the truth came out, they would face it together. "Your species and mine have never interacted before," Jake began. "When Queen Zorathia and I accidentally made contact, it triggered a biological bonding reaction. Her enhanced senses responded to my natural chemistry in a way that created an emotional and physical connection." Dr. Velter frowned. "That's impossible. Our bonding mechanisms only work with other Luminari, but they do work with humans," Zorathia said quietly, finally finding her voice. "And the connection goes both ways. Jake has experienced changes too. Enhanced empathy, improved intuition, better understanding of emotional states." The room erupted in angry voices. Some of the Luminari advisors accused Jake of somehow manipulating their queen. A few of the Earth diplomats wondered if this was some kind of elaborate hoax. Everyone seemed to be talking at once, and no one was listening. Then Zorathia stood up. The simple act of their queen rising to her feet brought immediate silence, even angry and confused. They all recognized the authority in her posture. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying the power of someone born to rule. "You want to know the truth. Here it is. What happened to me wasn't an attack or a weakness. It was a revelation." She walked around the table until she was standing beside Jake. "This connection has shown me something I never understood before. True partnership isn't about political alliances or trade agreements. It's about finding someone who sees you for who you really are, not just the position you hold." General Thane shook his head. "Your Majesty, you're not thinking clearly. This human has obviously influenced your judgment, has he?" Zorathia asked. "Let me tell you what Jake has taught me. He's shown me that strength doesn't come from hiding your feelings or pretending you don't need anyone else. Real strength comes from being brave enough to be vulnerable, to admit when you need help, to trust someone else with your true self." She turned to address both delegations. "For weeks, we've been trying to negotiate a treaty based on what each side can get from the other. But what if we approached it differently? What if we build our alliance on what we can give to each other?" Jake stepped forward, his voice gentle but clear. "I'm just an engineer. I fix machines when they break down. But I've learned something important from knowing Queen Zorathia. Sometimes the most powerful connections happen when you're not looking for them. When two different systems come together, they don't always create problems. Sometimes they create something better than either one alone. Dr. Peterson, the Earth ambassador, leaned forward with interest. Are you suggesting that this biological compatibility could be a foundation for deeper cooperation between our species? Zarathia nodded. Exactly, if our bodies can adapt to each other. If we can form these unexpected bonds, then maybe we're meant to be more than just trading partners. Maybe we're meant to be true allies. The debate that followed was intense but different from before. Instead of arguing about territories and resources, they found themselves discussing possibilities. What could their civilizations accomplish? Together, how could they learn from each other's strengths? It wasn't easy. Some of the advisors on both sides remained skeptical. There were concerns about the implications of interspecies bonding, questions about how such relationships would be governed, and worries about the political complications. But something had shifted in the room. The fear and suspicion were being replaced by curiosity and hope. Over the following days, a new kind of treaty was negotiated, not just a trade agreement, but a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and understanding. Cultural exchange programs were established. Research initiatives were planned to study the beneficial effects of human-luminari interaction. And most importantly, both species committed to approaching their relationship with open minds and hearts. Queen Zarathia announced that she would be spending part of each year on Earth, not as a ruler imposing her will, but as a partner learning from a different way of life. Jake joined the cultural exchange program, his engineering skills and natural empathy making him perfect for helping the two species understand each other. Their love story became a symbol of what was possible when differences were seen as opportunities rather than obstacles. They worked together on projects that combined human innovation with luminary technology, creating solutions that neither species could have developed alone. And in the quiet moments between their public duties, they continued to share those simple conversations that had brought them together. To people from different worlds who had found in each other something they never knew they were missing. The stars that had once seemed like barriers between civilizations became pathways connecting hearts across the vastness of space. Love, it turned out, was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of bridging any distance and overcoming any difference. In the end, the most important treaty wasn't written on paper or signed by governments. It was written in the bond between two souls who dared to believe that love truly could conquer all.